Well, guys, do you remember? Remember how much we talked last summer about Konaté nonstop because he had 1 year left on his contract and it was the right time to sell him. Otherwise, they risked what ended up happening, which is that he became a free agent and has already said he's leaving Liverpool. And this morning, people have already started talking a lot about that possibility, which I think is becoming more and more likely with every passing minute. And Alberto Pereiro said it on Onda Quero that Florentino Pérez or Florentino Pérez's campaign has already secured the signing of Ibrahima with Atepa. And well, does it match what Real Madrid has been doing all these past years? For players whose contracts are ending, well, they are invited to come and there will be a signing bonus. Let's see if it's like what happened with Alaba, with Rudiger, and so on. But in any case, it always works out better because this player, well, if you have to get him out of the club, even last year, at some point I thought this gentleman was going to renew, but in the end, look, he didn't. It's true that the season hasn't been good, which is leaving some doubts among some Madrid fans regarding his signing. Earlier, I want to mention a thought from a Twitter user, Tony Franchosa, which I found really funny. He said, "Sometimes I see him as the best center back in history, and other times it seems like he has forgotten how to play football." I mean, damn, the middle ground between those two should be fine, but of course it leaves you feeling a bit unsure, right? I've definitely seen this guy in brilliant moments, but I've also seen him, though I don't watch all of Liverpool's matches, not even close, in situations where he's been completely exposed. Um, Many times this depends on a coach, on the playing system. Sometimes in certain systems, the center backs end up very exposed and all that. Look, we need a human being there in the center back position, someone who, if possible, doesn't get injured. Although once you get to Madrid, anything can happen. And if he's going to play at Liverpool, which is the case, well, I think that's fine. By the way, is Rudiger going to be renewed? Well, if there was any doubt, which I don't think there was, it's going to happen, of course. And well, Rodriguez is going to be a real soldier for Mourinho. And Konaté, well, at first it sounds good to me, and then we'll have to see how he does. If this is true, if this thing about Konaté to Real Madrid is true, then it would be another signing by Florentino. I mean, there's Mourinho, and by the way, about Mourinho, Cortegan said yesterday that he's already signed. I mean, they're not going to pay 15 million now just because the deadline has passed and because we're now in an election period. They're not going to pay much more than what Benfica was originally asking for. I knew Florentino wouldn't let something like that slip by. If he had, it would have been unbelievable, right? And that agreement is already done and signed. But I imagine they must have included some clauses. There's a clause in case Florentino isn't elected, which is highly unlikely that Florentino wouldn't be elected as president of Real Madrid. Well, in that case, the coach would be compensated and, well, the hiring wouldn't go through. Since Rick has already said he's not his coach, though not very directly, not quite like that, but it's clear he's not the coach, especially since he says he has someone else. Now we'll talk about Rodri, by the way. Florentino Pérez gave an interview to La Razón and says they're lying. Real Madrid will always belong to its members. Their proposals will lead it to ruin. Here are two things. I agree with him on one, but on the other, he's doing the same as the other person. Broad terms and going to the extremes, right? I mean, exaggerating about the opponent. Look, I think Madrid. We have doubts, questions arise about what will be done, and so on. And it's been a topic of debate in the last few hours, whether you open it or not. Yeah, well, it started because one day I thought, why not 20 or so? In fact, for example, there's also the question of if you want to know how much the club is worth, because if you sell 5% with just 0.5 or 1%, you already know what the club is worth. Isn't there also talk that Madrid needs money and those 500 million about whether the club is valued at $10 billion? Those $500 million that would come in, because I think, well, what was talked about was in dollars, right? Okay, let's discuss in dollars. You sell 5%, 500 comes in. They're very rich, of course, right? The ones who come in. And they're also selling you the idea that the current Real Madrid model makes it very hard to compete in the short and medium term, let alone in the long term, with other clubs that have different kinds of structures, etc. And what Florentino is doing here, and this is what I truly believe, despite all the messages I'm receiving and so on, honestly, I care less and less about this. I also read comments from those who say, Miguel Serrano, just keep doing your thing. I think Florentino. It's impossible that, given how much this man clearly loves Real Madrid and all the great things he's done for the club, he would act otherwise. It's impossible that he would leave us in a tough spot at the end of his term. But let's hope Florentino lasts much longer. But it's been decades and decades. But that he would do this to us. I mean, how could we even think that? And this is where Riquelme, I think, goes to the extreme and exaggerates just as much as Florentino in the second part of this headline. How could he do this to us? I don't think so. I really don't. But we should still ask ourselves questions, right? And here Florentino says their proposals will lead Real Madrid to ruin. And he still doesn't say the name of his opponent, the other candidate. If someone like Enrique Riquelme comes in, it will have to happen in the next few years because Florentino won't be around forever. I don't think he would ruin Real Madrid. That's just exaggerating to gain an advantage over the opponent. The other guy probably does the same. And something interesting that Florentino mentioned in this interview is this about the Negreira issue. He says the league and the federation, they are accomplices. We are going to present a dossier in 15 days about everything that has happened in history and what has happened in recent years. Because the same referees remained in recent years, the same things kept happening. We're going to work hard now. I have friends in every country and they ask me, but how? How do you allow that? Well, that's just how the league, the federation, and the referees committee are in Spanish competition. Here, I absolutely agree with Florentino. I endorse every word of the referee, what he says. You know what I have against it, right? Acting now, because it's true that in the criminal case, we appeared as a private prosecution from the very beginning. Well, very good, fantastic. As it couldn't be any other way, right? Because there are people saying, how come Madrid didn't act at the beginning? Yes, we acted at the beginning. Maybe we took a little longer. Remember, an official statement from Real Madrid was expected after the Barcelona Negreira case broke out. It took a month and a bit, almost. I don't remember exactly how long. But other clubs, they had already done it, and we said, well, it's just that Madrid is preparing it well. Okay, here the only problem is there are two things. And yesterday we saw it with Laporta admitting that Madrid had helped him with, and it's not Naslagari, the Super League, had helped him with one of the levers, or at least gave him the idea of the levers. Since we were with them on the Super League issue, we weren't as forceful as we should have been, but not in the criminal case anymore, rather in the administrative side. For now, this dossier to UEFA, which Florentino, by the way, has said he's going to present as soon as the elections are over, why now when it could have been done earlier? And you might say, no, it hadn't been investigated that much yet. Look, the Civil Guards report, Judge Aguirre's ruling, which talks about systemic corruption, etc., has been around for at least, let me see, 2 years. Okay, a year and a half. It would have been better to do it sooner. With Florentino, two things are happening. What you're saying is what he feels and what we all feel. He's really upset about the Negreira issue, like all of us. And another thing that adds to this and makes it worse is that the one who betrayed him was Laporta. And so he's also acting with a bit of, hey, you've betrayed me. And I think that's great. But there was a moment when Florentino, for business reasons, wasn't as forceful as he should have been. Of course, that's true too. And there's nothing wrong with admitting it. When Florentino claims he acted as soon as he found out, that's just not true. He's not being honest. Sorry, I've said this before in another video. I can't say anything different. But anyway, we're all in here, we're all in, and better late than never. But, for example, it's amazing that UEFA already has extensive documentation in their hands before Madrid even hands it over. And it's been because of the complaint, this particular one, from Juan Luis Martín de Pozuelo and all the people who have worked with him. It's amazing that UEFA has all that from our side before it gets it from Real Madrid. But, well, man. By the way, Tomás González is saying in the debate that Madrid also wants Atletico to join this and to complain to UEFA about what Barça has done. Because I repeat, beyond the criminal side, there's the administrative side where UEFA can still take action. And FIFA too. UEFA not inviting Barça to the Champions League, and FIFA even stepping in, getting involved and telling the federation, you need to relegate these people. That's what should have been done from the start. That's why I'm angry. And so are a lot of people. Like Korek, for example, who took a break, but that's because he once expressed that and dared to criticize Florentino, and they tore him apart. Well, man. Well, Rodri just spoke, by the way, within the Spanish national team. Just a moment, because there were other statements from Florentino, and these are from that extensive interview in La Razón, and that's when he talks about Mourinho. We just said that Mourinho has already signed, according to Cortegana. He says, Cortegana says, I mean, it's not about Mourinho. Because he says again, or rather, he still doesn't say that he has him under contract. But anyway, the point is that he shares his particular vision about the players and the coach and all that, and he says the same thing again. And I repeat the same thing I've been saying since January. The diagnosis is not good. The squad has problems. We have very good players, but the football level and the IQ in the locker room have dropped, obviously. And Florentino thinks everything is fine, even though he's going to make signings, and that a good coach needs to come here and put everyone in their place. As stated, having top players and a coach who maintains order leads to our successes. The coach must embrace Real Madrid's culture. But the thing is, many times, poor Ancelotti, poor Xavi, and even Starvaloa, when players have gotten injured in certain positions, like center back, for example, they've had to put Chouameni there. I mean, the fact that they have to put players in those spots out of their position, like Camavinga back in the day, playing as a left back or something like that, it's because those players were missing, so they had to put others out of position. You can't just say a coach should put everyone in their proper position. The club management also has to support, in this case, by signing players in the winter if needed, planning the squad better, and of course not thinking that Valverde is Cruz and that you can just put him where Cruz plays. Why not? Cruz and Modric should have been replaced earlier. Well, now, about Rodriguez. Rodriguez, come on, he spoke and said this. Notice that he doesn't deny it. He doesn't deny it. I think it's clear, right? Although this Wednesday, they'll talk about that other star from Riquelme's candidacy, and they'll also talk about Rodriguez. Let's see if he says it now, because Riquelme hasn't said it literally, but he's hinted at it. Well, anyway, it's already implied that Rodriguez would sign for Real Madrid if Riquelme becomes president. They asked Rodriguez about this at Spain's training camp. Well,
have you spoken with either of the two candidates for Madrid president?
Presidents of Madrid?
As Darius said, we're here to discuss the World Cup. Anything else isn't about my future. I'll wait and won't sign anything before the World Cup ends.
Well, candidate, and yet he says it. I mean, what's supposed to happen is happening, so that the candidacy doesn't fall apart for a guy who promises something like that. World Cup? Well, that's it. He's already giving the key points of his sports project. And the thing is, one of the parties doesn't deny it. By the way, Florentino, I think. That's it. He has sent a message in that sense. For that reason, he has sent a message in that sense for the reason of be careful with what this guy is promising you. Representatives call us to tell us that this isn't true, that this isn't how it is. Well, then someone should come out and say it publicly that this isn't how it is. Rodri's representative. And if it's about talking about the World Cup, let Rafaela Pimenta come out and say this isn't true. When that happens, the other person's candidacy will fall apart. But if it doesn't happen, we have to give credibility to the possibility that it could be true. By the way, Real Madrid, apparently, Florentino Pérez and the current Real Madrid board, in theory, and as Ramon told us, wanted Rodri in the end. I mean, they were monitoring him. They were, he said. A devastating report against signing Rodri, and they would have ruled him out. Well, apparently there is a devastating report against signing Rodri, and they would have ruled him out. It doesn't necessarily mean that if Riquelme doesn't do it, maybe during the summer, and as Darius said, World Cup, Florentino might say now that everything has been mentioned, it's all up to this guy, right? But those reports are also very relative. You know, he tore his ACL, etc. We've said it here a million times, but I'll wait until the end, you know. This isn't a report from La Sexta. It's a report about Franco Mastantuono that recommended signing him for 60-something million, and look how it turned out. For now, it seems, I think he's a good player. If you loan him out, maybe in a few years, we'll be talking about something else. But the thing is, sports reports are very relative. They're very relative. Well, no, there's a report here from the World Cup that rules him out. Okay, fine. Damn, well, there are quite a few players. And the report on Hazard back in the day, of course. No, it's just that it turned out badly. Okay, fine. Yes, things can turn out well in the end. Damn, well, there are quite a few players. And the report on Hazard back in the day, of course, it just turned out badly. Things can turn out well or they can turn out badly. Bueno, said Luis Enrique. With this, he finished. This is just amazing. For me, it's like every time I see something, you know, I'm amazed by the report that Luis Enrique was giving us in the Luis Enrique report. This one, I've watched it all, but every new clip I find is even more amazing. This is what he said at one point in that, at the end, well, at one point in that Movistar program. I'll wait. We want every time he plays the 24 balls.
We have one more here. How do we do it here, gentlemen? Run. And when you don't have to run, you leave this player free. And when he plays the ball and the ball comes back, I press. And who presses him? Barcola. For what? So that if they don't get past, the ball goes to a fullback. A midfielder doesn't have the ball.
Attention.
Now we are clearly conditioned by a player in our pressing whose name is Kylian Mbappé. He isn't a defender for us and has never defended. It's difficult for him. So we've adjusted our system so Kylian Mbappé runs as little as possible on defense because he scores 50 goals and gives 25 assists. Well, since we don't want it to be either Kylian Mbappe's last Champions League match with the Paris Saint PSG jersey, nor do we want it to be our last Champions League match. We changed the way of handling things, Kylian. If you don't run, it just doesn't work. It's that simple.
Did the perspective change? If Kylian Mbappé knew he was staying at PSG, Luis Enrique would have had to manage him. But Luis Enrique couldn't handle Kylian Mbappé. To make him press or run more and do more defensively from the front line, Luis Enrique couldn't do it. But he said, well, he's leaving, so now I'll control everything myself. But watch out, in a decisive Champions League match, I don't remember exactly which one, I think it was the one against Barca. Hey, for not playing our last match, sorry. And then, also, we found other clips where we tell him, dude, you have to press sorry. He says, if I don't want to be left out here. Now, we changed during the year and against Soso and Lille and whoever else we played this way. You might not defend, but here in the Champions League, you have to defend, man, because if not, we might be playing our last Champions match. Heavy. It's just that every time I saw something like this, man. Anyway, well, I hope everything goes well for you. Give a like if you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to the channel, comment, and share. See you in the next one. Bye.